The galaxy laughed when the Threx Dominion issued their challenge. Across countless worlds, broadcasts replayed the reptilian warlord's taunt, his voice translated into hundreds of tongues, dripping with scorn. Send your finest hunter, Earth. Let him walk among warriors, and we shall see if your kind can still crawl when the ground drinks blood. Laughter followed, cruel and echoing, from species that had forgotten what fear sounded like. Humanity was young to the stars, barely tolerated, their weapons considered archaic, and their soldiers relics of a savage past. But the laughter carried too far. It reached Earth's military channels, and Earth did not laugh back. In the cold silence of a high-orbit command vessel, the United Earth Command convened. Around the table sat leaders who had seen too many wars to find humor in arrogance. The Threx had demanded spectacle, a demonstration of dominance on the jungle world of Vryll, where conditions killed faster than bullets. It was meant to humiliate humanity, to show that even their best hunter could not survive a single day. The generals understood the insult for what it was, a declaration that humans were prey pretending to be predators. They needed an answer that would silence laughter, not with words, but with something that would echo longer. They chose a man who did not need to be introduced, Sergeant Elias Vance. To the few who had served beside him, he was called Ghostroot. To the rest of the world, he was a rumor wrapped in silence, a sniper who could disappear in plain sight. His confirmed kills during the Eurasian conflicts numbered 900, though whispers claimed the real figure was higher. He had vanished from active duty years ago, retreating into the wilderness after a mission that left his entire unit dead. When the summons came, he didn't hesitate. He simply packed the rifle he had built by hand, checked its scope for dust, and walked out of exile. Vance arrived at the Orbital Command Center with a duffel bag, a single rifle case, and the unshakable calm of a man who had already made peace with death. The officers briefing him spoke in quick, efficient tones. Alien atmosphere, high humidity, corrosive rain, predators that sensed heat. He listened without expression, memorizing every fact, but it was clear he didn't need them. You're not expected to win, one colonel admitted finally, his voice low. Just survive long enough to remind them what we are. Vance's reply was so quiet, it was almost lost in the hum of the lights. What we are, he repeated. That's the easy part. His mission parameters were brutally simple. Survive 10 days on Vryll. Engage and eliminate any Threx patrols encountered and extract alive. The galaxy would be watching through the Threx's own surveillance feeds. It wasn't just a fight. It was theater, diplomacy through blood. Vance boarded the drop pod with nothing but his rifle, a combat knife, and a small canister of camouflage gel. As the pod detached, the vessel's crew watched the descent on silent monitors, their faces caught between fear and fascination. One whispered, "He's going alone." General Nkora didn't look away from the display. "He's not alone," she said. "He's human." Vryll swallowed the pod without ceremony. The descent burned through sulfur clouds and ended in a crash of mud and steam. When the hatch hissed open, Vance stepped out into a world that seemed alive in every direction. Trees as wide as fortresses reached toward a sky veiled in green light. Vines pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins. The air smelled of metal and rot. He moved carefully, testing the ground, the weight of the humidity pressing against his skin. The mud came up to his knees in places. Perfect cover, he thought. The Threx had chosen this world because it was hostile. That made it his ally. He stripped the pod for parts, salvaging what could be turned into traps. His camouflage gel mixed with the native soil, turning his armor into an extension of the earth. When he lay flat, even his own heartbeat seemed to blend into the rhythm of the jungle. The only sound was the whisper of water dripping from leaves onto the rifle's barrel. Whisper Wind, he had named it years ago, a weapon tuned not for power, but for silence. Hours passed before he saw movement, a Threx patrol of 4, their armor glinting faintly in the haze. They moved with the confidence of predators who believed themselves untouchable. He studied them through the scope, counting their heartbeats, memorizing the rhythm of their steps. One of them spoke in a guttural tongue, mocking something unseen. Vance exhaled, adjusted for wind, and fired. The shot was almost gentle, a soft cough swallowed by the rain. The alien dropped instantly, a neat hole between its eyes. The others froze, confusion flickering into fear. They began to shout, scanning the trees with energy rifles. The second fell before they could triangulate his position. The third tried to run. The fourth raised a communicator, panic flooding his movements. Vance waited until he saw the device rise, then fired again. The shot passed clean through the transmitter, shattering it in the alien skull in the same instant. Silence returned, heavy and absolute. Steam rose from the bodies. He moved quickly, retrieving what ammunition could be salvaged, leaving no trace of his passage. The jungle closed behind him, erasing even the memory of what had happened. In the orbiting Threx command ship, confusion turned to outrage. They had sent 4 hunters. Now there was only static and silence. "Find him," their commander hissed, claws gouging the table. On the human ship, a single transmission flickered across the monitors, a flat line of alien vitals. General Nkora said nothing. She simply closed her fist and nodded once. Vance found a rise, overlooking the swamp, and settled in, the rifle resting across his knees. The rain returned, steady and cold. He watched the mist coil between the trees, listening to the alien world breathe. For the first time since his arrival, he allowed himself a quiet smile. Not of joy, but of purpose. The hunt had begun, and he was exactly where he was meant to be. The galaxy would learn soon enough that Earth's answer wasn't fleets or words. It was a single man who never missed. The bodies were gone by dawn. The Threx retrieved their fallen with mechanical precision, leaving only gouged mud and the metallic scent of spilled blood behind. From his perch high in the dripping canopy, Vance watched the recovery drones glide through the mist like silent vultures. He marked their scanning patterns, their intervals of sweep and retreat, memorizing rhythm as easily as breathing. Every movement, every sound was data. Every detail was a weapon waiting to be used. By midday, the jungle began to hum with alien activity. Threx dropships pierced the clouds, flooding the terrain with infrared pulses that swept over every living thing. Vance pressed himself deeper into the roots of a massive tree, his body slick with the paste of soil and chlorophyll. His thermal signature vanished beneath the jungle's heat. Through the faint static of his comm link, a burst of alien chatter broke through, urgent, guttural, furious. They had named him the Phantom of Earth. Even through the distortion, he could hear the tremor of fear threaded into their orders. He moved after sunset, when the alien light patterns disoriented the nocturnal insects and the jungle turned chaotic with motion. His steps were weightless, his breath shallow, his rifle an extension of his will. Ahead, faint blue glows shimmered through the leaves. 5 Threx trackers, equipped with heat visors and drones that pulsed like fireflies. They advanced in a wedge formation, careful but uncertain, following footprints that weren't there. Vance crawled beneath them, silent as the tide, and set his first trap, a loop of fine monofilament strung between 2 roots. When a lead tracker brushed it, his armor's leg servos locked, freezing him in place. The others turned, confused, just as Vance rose from the mud behind them. 3 suppressed shots later, the clearing fell still. The last alien, trembling, tried to radio a warning, but Vance had already melted back into shadow. The jungle seemed to breathe differently after that. He began to use it as an accomplice. When acid rain fell, he angled fragments of alien armor to redirect it, corroding their sensors. He used the phosphorescent moss to mark paths that led to traps, paths he could follow in reverse while his pursuers were blinded by glare. The world became a chessboard, every vine and puddle a piece in his design. To him, war was never chaos. It was order disguised as madness. Back aboard the Threx command vessel orbiting Vryll, Karth Vren watched the live feed transmissions through narrowed eyes. His warriors were dying faster than data could update. He saw only glimpses of their killer, a flicker of motion, a shape where none should be, a shot that came from nowhere. Primitive, one of his lieutenants murmured, trying to reassure him. Karth's tail lashed once across the floor. Primitive doesn't terrify an army, he hissed. Find him. On the ground, the Threx began deploying their hunters. Massive soldiers enhanced with psychic trackers and drones that sang with sonar pulses. The sound rippled through the canopy, a high-frequency hum that made even the insects flee. Vance crouched low, feeling the vibration travel through the mud into his bones. They were adapting. So would he. He set up false signatures using the corpses of alien scouts, burying heat sticks within them so sensors would read them as living targets. When the hunters closed in, they unleashed plasma volleys on their own dead. Confusion spread like wildfire through the comm channels, their voices breaking under the weight of unseen fear. For the first time since he'd arrived, Vance spoke into his comm. His tone was calm, steady, a whisper of steel. You wanted a show, he said. Keep watching. Then he cut the channel. Hours bled together. The jungle became a graveyard of armor and steam. He rationed his shots, never more than one per encounter, each placed with surgical intent. He began carving small tally marks into the damp bark of a fallen tree, each one a life taken, each one a warning. When he reached 12, he stopped counting. Numbers no longer mattered. Survival did. The alien response grew desperate. They launched illumination flares that burned for hours, turning the jungle into a surreal battlefield of gold light and shadow. Vance adapted again, smearing reflective mud across his armor and scope to blend into the glow. He used their own light to strike back. One shot took out a drone mid-flight. The falling wreckage drew a squad's attention long enough for him to slip behind them. Another shot shattered the breathing apparatus of a Threx commander, silencing their orders with a gurgling hiss. Each encounter etched deeper lines into his face, though he rarely allowed himself to feel them. In those silent hours between hunts, when rain drummed against his helmet and the jungle's song quieted, he thought of Earth. Not the generals or the war, but the sound of wind against pine trees, the soft hum of a rifle being cleaned by firelight. He had never wanted this mission to be about vengeance or pride. To him, it was proof. Proof that human instinct, sharpened by centuries of survival, could not be mocked by those who thought war was spectacle. When dawn came again, the air was thick with smoke. The Threx had started burning sections of the jungle, trying to flush him out. The flames illuminated the twisted roots and bones of trees centuries old. Vance moved through the inferno, low and deliberate, each step calculated between bursts of falling ash. Through the haze, he saw something new, a figure towering above the others, plated in dark armor that pulsed with light. Vryll had arrived. The warlord's voice broke through the comms, amplified and venomous. You've earned my attention, human, he said. Now you'll earn your death. Vance crouched, watching him through the crosshairs. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't since landing, a flicker of challenge, not from arrogance, but recognition. The kind of respect that predators share before the kill. He adjusted his scope, slow and patient, and whispered to the rifle as though to an old friend. Guess it's just you and me now. He didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. The jungle was still watching, and the duel deserved silence. Above, thunder rolled across Vryll's swollen sky, echoing the promise of what was coming next. The storm arrived with the force of judgment, tearing through the canopy in sheets of water that hissed against burning leaves. Lightning fractured the sky, each flash revealing the jagged outlines of shattered trees and scorched armor. Vance moved through the deluge like a shadow of intent, every step deliberate, every breath controlled. He had waited days for this, the chaos that leveled every advantage and stripped war down to its simplest truth: the one who endures wins. Ahead, Vryll's armor gleamed faintly through the mist, a moving constellation of blue light amid the ruin. The Threx warlord advanced with the slow patience of a beast that knew its prey had nowhere left to run. Vance crouched low, hands steady on Whisperwind's stock, eyes narrowing as raindrops streaked across the lens. His wound from the last encounter throbbed under his armor, a hot pulse that reminded him he was still human, still breakable. He ignored it. Pain was noise, and noise got you killed. He shifted slightly, aligning the rifle's barrel through a gap in the vines. Karth stopped, turning his head as if scenting the air. "You hide well," the alien called out, voice distorted by static and rain. "But the jungle burns. Your ghosts burn with it." Vance said nothing. He let the silence answer for him. The rain thickened, drowning sound and sight alike. And for a moment, both hunters were just silhouettes locked and waiting. Karth moved first, his plasma rifle cutting arcs of light through the storm, carving trenches into the mud where Vance had been seconds before. The sniper slid behind a fallen trunk, mud spraying around him as heat seared the air. He waited for the telltale hiss of cooling plasma, then rolled left, raising the rifle. Through the scope, he caught the faint shimmer of Karth's heat signature. 2 hearts pounding, one slightly slower than the other. The second heart. That was his target. The shot cut through the rain like a whisper of inevitability. It struck just beneath the warlord's shoulder plate, sending a shockwave through his armor. Karth staggered, growled, and fired wildly into the trees, the plasma lighting the world in electric blue. Vance didn't retreat. He crawled closer, closing the distance between them, using the storm's roar as camouflage. The alien's breathing became ragged, the arrogance replaced by something heavier, rawer. "You think you've won, ape?" Karth spat, voice trembling with fury and disbelief. "You kill in shadows. I fight in light." "Light doesn't matter," Vance murmured, though no one could hear him. "Only silence does." They met in the center of a flooded clearing, lightning illuminating them in brief, violent flashes. Karth towered above him, his plasma rifle discarded in favor of a blade forged from his own armor. Vance's rifle was too close for another clean shot. He let it drop, drawing his knife in one fluid motion. For a moment, they circled, soldier and warlord, predator and prey, both too stubborn to claim either role. Karth lunged, the blade cutting through the air with a hum that vibrated in Vance's ribs. He ducked under the strike, driving his knife into a joint between armor plates. The alien roared, slamming a fist into Vance's chest and sending him sprawling into the mud. The impact drove the air from his lungs, but he didn't stay down. As Karth advanced, Vance reached for the rifle, dragging it through the muck. His fingers found the trigger just as the warlord raised his blade for the final strike. The shot, fired from barely 10 feet away, tore through Karth's secondary heart and shattered the armor from within. The alien froze, blade suspended mid-swing, then collapsed forward into the water with a sound more like surrender than defeat. For a long time, Vance didn't move. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, and the jungle, once filled with screams and thunder, fell eerily quiet. He rose slowly, pain radiating through his side where Karth's strike had grazed him. The wound burned, but it wasn't mortal. He knelt beside the fallen warlord, watching the faint light fade from the alien's armor. "You fought well," he said quietly. "It wasn't praise, it was acknowledgement. In death, even enemies deserve that." He signaled for extraction. The faint tone in his earpiece confirmed the beacon's activation. Above, the storm clouds began to thin, revealing the dim, fractured light of Vryll's twin suns. As the dropship descended, its engines rippling the pools around him, Vance felt the weight of what he'd done settle over him. Not pride, not victory, but the bone-deep understanding that he'd once again become what humanity called upon when dignity was on the line. He'd killed to remind the galaxy that humans were not a race to be laughed at. They were survivors. And survival was the oldest form of warfare there was. When the dropship's ramp lowered, he stepped aboard without looking back. The operator met his eyes briefly, then looked away. "Mission complete," she said. He only nodded. Words felt unnecessary here. The jungle below was already reclaiming the battlefield, vines curling over alien corpses, mud swallowing footprints until there was nothing left but silence. Days later, aboard the orbiting command vessel, General Nkora reviewed the combat footage in her dimly lit office. The final sequence, Karth's fall, the quiet after, played again and again. Around her, aides whispered statistics. 1 man deployed, 1 man extracted, 147 hostiles neutralized. She dismissed them all with a wave. Numbers didn't capture what had happened on Vryll. They never did. Send a report, she said, and shut the feeds down. Let the galaxy wonder. When Vance returned to Earth, the world didn't greet him with parades. He preferred it that way. He went back to the mountains, to the silence and the snow, to the place where ghosts could rest. The rifle, cleaned and reassembled, leaned against the wall beside him. He watched the sky as evening fell, the first stars piercing through the dark. Somewhere out there, alien worlds whispered his name, not with laughter, but with fear. He smiled faintly, the expression more tired than proud. They'll come again, he said to no one, his voice almost lost to the wind. And I'll be here. The snow began to fall, soft and endless, erasing his tracks as it had before. In the quiet, his legend grew larger than the man himself, a story retold across 1,000 worlds. They called him the Ghost of Earth, the one who hunted gods in the rain.